Thanks, Sal. Let me extend my welcome to that of Samuel's, especially if you're new or visiting with us this morning for our Family Sunday. Hopefully you got a handout on your way in. It looks a bit like this. If you didn't, there's some still on the table in the foyer. Kids, you might like to draw some pictures on our handout as I tell you about the different characters from today's true story from the Bible. And if you come and find me afterwards and show me your drawings, I've got some sweet treats for you. Bigger kids and adults, you can use that handout to write down some notes as well if you like. Sweet treats optional for you. When Alison and I lived in South Africa, the first place we stayed in had a little electricity box that you had to get a voucher for at the local supermarket and then enter in the number so that your lights and your oven and your other appliances kept working. Interesting system. One day, for some reason or other, the little box stopped working, and so the company sent someone out to have a look at it and to fix it. And I got talking to the guy, and he was quite interested in the fact that we were from Australia and we'd come to South Africa and that we were there to study at Bible college. And so the conversation moved on to spiritual things. My view, he declared, is that God helps those who help themselves. God helps those who help themselves. Maybe that's a view or a saying that you've heard others say. Maybe it's a view that you hold yourself. God helps those who help themselves. It's a saying, it's a view that means that a person should take some initiative, to show some effort, make an effort, before expecting any help or assistance from God or other people. Sometimes it gets presented as something that comes from the Bible. It doesn't, by the way. Well, not quite like that anyway. As we'll see, the Bible actually has a far more beautiful and far more different story to tell than that. One of the problems with that saying, with that view, is that what happens when you can't help yourself? Where does that leave you? And what does that say about God? If God only helps those who help themselves. Well, we're going to be spending some time thinking about these things this morning by looking at a part of the Bible called 2 Kings chapter 5. And the first person that we meet in our story is an army captain. The name of this army captain was Naaman. He was a commander, a captain in the army of Aram, also known as Syria. So Naaman was someone who was very important. His master, the king, thought very highly of him. Naaman was a great man in the sight of the king, and everyone from the least to the greatest knew him to be a strong, successful soldier who had brought victory to the people of Aram. So I guess he was kind of like a hero. Although really it was God who had given the victory, not Naaman. So Naaman, he was strong, he was mighty, he was successful, he was a hero, he was important. Even the king looked up to him and respected him because of what he had done. Kids, I wonder how you're going drawing Naaman. I hope I've given you some ideas. But despite all of this, Naaman, he had a very big problem. He had leprosy. All his victories, all his might could not remove this one blight. Having leprosy was horrible. Thankfully, we don't see it here in Australia, much if at all. It meant that you got spots all over you. Maybe you can put some spots on Naaman if you're doing some drawing. He had spots all over him. Leprosy also meant that you couldn't feel anything. There was no cure, and in the end, it killed you. Naaman, despite being so strong and mighty and successful, so important, a hero, he needed help desperately. And so let me introduce you to our second character in the story, a little servant girl. You see, what had happened is that on one of those raids from the soldiers of Aram, the soldiers of Syria that they'd carried out, a little girl from the nation of Israel had been taken captive. We're not told her name because, unlike Naaman, people didn't think she was all that important. I'll let you be the judge of that. And she had ended up becoming a servant, a slave for Naaman's wife. We're not told what had happened to her parents or if she had brothers or sisters. Perhaps they'd been killed. They'd at least been separated from each other. We know she wasn't with them anymore, and now here she was in a foreign land, living in a strange home and serving people that she didn't know. And while she was living there, serving Naaman's wife, she found out about Naaman and his leprosy, his terrible problem. Now, given all that had happened to her so far, she could have been excused for thinking, serves him right for all those things that he's done. That's what you get for being a person like that. But instead, one day she said the most amazing thing to her mistress, Naaman's wife. This little servant girl said, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Now, we might like to and want to help people that we like, family, friends, people like that. But this little girl, she wanted to help her enemy. She wanted to bless Naaman, someone who had been responsible for separating her from her family and bringing her to a strange foreign land and making her a slave. She wanted to do good to Naaman. As well as love, she showed remarkable faith, didn't she? She had no doubt that the prophet could cure her master if he went to him, even of something as terrible and life-threatening and serious as leprosy. Instead of hate, she was filled with love because she trusted the one above. While you're drawing the little servant girl, boys and girls, I hope you might also be encouraged by her story as we go along, because sometimes when you're young and little, you can wonder whether God can use you in the lives of others. Maybe you feel too small or too unimportant to be used by God. Well, here's the good news. God can use you. He has used people like you. This little girl proves it, doesn't she? And that's very encouraging. So Naaman went to his master the king and told him what the little girl from Israel had said. And the king said to Naaman, "By all means, go." And he sent a letter for Naaman to take with him and give to the king of Israel. And so off Naaman went, taking with him lots of silver and lots of gold and lots of clothes, because that's what someone important does. What Naaman brought with him would have been worth millions and millions of dollars today. Kids maybe might like to draw some silver and gold coins or some baskets of clothes. Here's what the king of Aram wrote in his letter to the king of Israel for Naaman to take with him. "With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy." But do you remember what the little girl had said? Who did she say could cure her master of leprosy? Not the king, but the prophet. But sometimes people like Naaman and people like the king, who like to think of themselves as important, think that people like them can do more than they actually can. Well, at least the king of Israel realized that. He knew what he could and couldn't do. Kids, if you've drawn the king of Aram, maybe writing his letter or maybe having a crown over his head or something like that, maybe you'd like to draw something interesting that happens to the king of Israel and his clothes. Have a listen. As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and he said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me?" It doesn't take much for one leader of a country to get angry at a leader of another country, does it? Sometimes it doesn't take much for wars and conflicts to start, and sadly we sometimes see that still today, don't we? This almost becomes a foreign affairs disaster. But as the king of Israel's response shows us, having leprosy was an extremely serious thing, wasn't it? The king talks about it in terms of dying and living. Despite all of his power and all of his control and all of his importance, it was something that not even he could do anything about. Though strangely, the king doesn't suggest that Naaman should go to the prophet, does he? Maybe not even the king knew what God could do through the prophet. The king, though important, could bring no life. All that the letter did was just cause strife. So Naaman had gone to the king, because that's where you go when you're someone important. And the king of Aram had sent a letter to the king of Israel, because that's what happens when you're someone important. And Naaman had brought lots of silver and lots of gold and lots of clothes, because that's what you do when you're someone important. And that was Naaman's big problem. Thinking that he was big, thinking he was important. And because he thought he was so big and so important, he thought that he deserved certain things. So we've met an army captain, a little servant girl, 2 kings, and now it's time to meet a prophet. A prophet in the Bible is someone who tells people messages from God and who's able to do special things because God gives him the strength and power to do them. The name of this prophet is Elisha, and here's what happened. Elisha heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, and so he sent the king this message: "Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." If only they'd listened in the first place. This was just what the little servant girl had been saying all along. So off Naaman went with his horses and his chariots. Remember, he had a lot of silver and a lot of gold and a lot of clothes. And he stopped at the door of Naaman's house. He stopped at the door at Elisha's house. You might like to draw Naaman knocking on the door of Elisha's house. Now, maybe Naaman was expecting some kind of big party to welcome him. Perhaps he was expecting the prophet to say, "Oh, Naaman, great and important one, what an honor, what a privilege, what a pleasure to have you come to my house." Well, Naaman did think he was pretty important after all. But Elisha the prophet wasn't even at home. Elisha had sent a messenger to give Naaman a message. And this was the message: "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River, and your flesh will be restored and you will be cleansed." I wonder what Naaman thought of that. Well, we don't have to wonder because we're told. Naaman went away angry and said, "I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not the rivers back home better than any of the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed?" So he turned and went off in a rage. Maybe you could draw him getting red in the face and steam coming out of his ears. You see, Naaman thought that because he was so big and so important that he needed to do something important to be healed. What he was being asked to do, wash in the waters of the Jordan River, was something that even a little child could do. It didn't seem very special or very important to him. He had lots of things, like a lot of us do, and that was his problem. Because he needed to realize that he actually had nothing and could do nothing to help himself in this situation. Thankfully for Naaman, he had some wise servants. His servants went to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed?" And do you know the amazing thing? Naaman humbly listened to his servants. He went down and dipped himself in the Jordan River 7 times as the man of God, the prophet, had told him. And do you know the even more amazing thing? Naaman's flesh was restored and made clean like that of a young child, He was cleansed. His leprosy was no more. His skin became like the skin of the little girl who had told him how he could be healed, because his faith had become like that of the little girls as well. Important Naaman, standing tall, had to become so very small. Well, what is this story about the proud captain and the brave little servant girl with the two kings and the prophet? What does it teach us about God, and what does it teach us about ourselves? We might not have leprosy like Naaman, but Naaman's problem was actually more than skin deep, wasn't it? And his problem is also our problem. Like Naaman, we all have leprosy of the heart. We are, each one of us, proud and like to think of ourselves as big and important. Sin has got such a hold of our hearts that it's actually made them stop working as they should. They're broken, and we're sicker than we realise. That's a little bit why we like the idea that God helps those who help themselves. Because that way, at least we think of it, we can do something. We can contribute something. Why, we can even help God. But the reality is that way of thinking, that God helps those who help themselves, it doesn't work. Because we're way too sick to help ourselves when it comes to God. We can't do great things to be rescued. We can't offer great things to be rescued. We can't do or offer anything that can change our situation. But here's the wonderful news: we don't have to. We don't need to. Because someone else has done the greatest thing. Someone else has offered and given the greatest thing. God has sent Jesus to rescue us. Jesus has given his own life for us when he died on the cross. He has lived the perfect life with no sin at all, and yet has taken the penalty that we deserved so that we don't have to face it. And he's come back from the dead to offer a fresh start and a new life, and he'll return again. You see, the Bible's message is all about grace. Grace. God's riches at Christ's expense. If we keep on being proud and thinking that we're big and important, that we don't need God, or that God helps those who help themselves, we're never going to receive and accept his grace, are we? And so, like Naaman, we need God to humble us, to help us admit that we have nothing and we can do nothing, and that the rivers of this world and all that they offer won't bring what we so desperately need. Instead, we're to trust in the one who has done everything and who has given everything for us. Are you willing to be saved, to be rescued God's way? Or will your pride get in the way of that happening? If you haven't already, today would be a great day to do that, to be rescued God's way, the only way, by trusting in Jesus alone. I'm going to pray a short prayer in a moment. I'll pray it slowly, and you might like to say it to God in the quietness of your own heart after me. Let's talk to God. Dear God, I'm sorry for being proud and thinking of myself as important. I humbly ask you that you would forgive me. Thank you for Jesus fixing my proud, sinful heart. I trust in him and his death for me. Amen. If you prayed that prayer this morning, it would be wonderful if you could share that with someone. perhaps your mum or dad or a friend you came with, or with Samuel or myself. We'd love to hear from you and to chat with you more. Thanks for listening. We're going to sing again, and kids, I look forward to seeing what you've come up with on your handouts, and maybe some adults as well. Let's sing together.